Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at how psychology went from just theories to actually shaping our world.
That's right.
Yeah,
We'll be taking a deep dive
a deep dive.
into a chapter from what seems to be a really interesting psychology textbook.
Yeah, it looks fascinating.
Yeah.
It's going to take us from the drama of the courtroom to the sometimes equally dramatic dynamics of the workplace.
That's right.
So buckle up.
Yeah, we're going to be uncovering how some early 20th century thinkers used psychology to influence everything from how we work to how we're persuaded.
Exactly. And I got to say,
Yeah.
when I saw the term psychotechnics
Right.
in our source material, I was like, is this some kind of sci-fi novel?
It does have a certain ring to it, doesn't it?
It does.
Essentially, it was a term used for the application of psychology to business and industry.
Okay.
And one of the key figures in this movement was Hugo Münsterberg.
Okay.
He was actually brought to Harvard by the one and only William James.
Wow. So we're talking about some serious psychology lineage here.
Yes.
But here's where it gets really interesting for me is this idea that like your workplace might be secretly running psychological experiments on you.
Right.
This is not a new idea.
That's right.
So how did we get here?
Well, we need to start with Frederick Winslow Taylor
Okay.
and his theory of scientific management.
Okay. Scientific management sounds very impressive, but I'm sensing there's more to this story.
There is.
Okay.
Taylorism, as it came to be known, had a really big impact on how work was organized.
Okay.
Taylor believed in breaking down tasks into smaller, more manageable steps,
Okay.
and then figuring out the most efficient way to perform each step.
Got it.
So this led to the assembly line and a focus on speed and efficiency.
So instead of having like a skilled craftsman create a whole product,
Yes.
you have workers specializing in these really tiny repetitive tasks.
Exactly. And this led to what was called de-skilling. Skilled jobs were broken down into these simpler tasks that could be learned quickly.
Got it.
So Taylor was trying to, in a way, apply the principles of engineering to human behavior.
It makes you wonder if Taylor ever actually like worked on a factory floor himself,
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, even today, like in the gig economy, there's this focus on like breaking down complex tasks into these micro jobs and this focus on speed and efficiency metrics.
Absolutely any parallels there.
Absolutely. The echoes of Taylorism are definitely still with us.
They are. Yeah.
Now, while Taylorism did increase productivity, it wasn't without its critics.
Okay.
And one of the biggest concerns was soldiering.
Soldiering, is that what it sounds like?
Yes.
Okay.
It refers to workers intentionally slowing down their work pace.
Okay.
And it was a direct response to Taylor's differential piece rate system.
So to understand soldiering, we need to understand this piece rate system.
Right.
Can you unpack that a bit? Sure. So Taylor believed in incentivizing workers to work faster.
Okay.
So he would set a standard time for a task,
Okay.
and then he would pay workers more
Uh-huh.
if they completed it in that time or faster.
Okay.
But if they didn't meet the standard, they were penalized.
So that sounds incredibly stressful. Like, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
No wonder workers tried to, like, find ways to game the system.
Right.
So soldiering was kind of their way of, like,
Yeah.
pushing back
Exactly.
against what they probably perceived as an unfair system.
Exactly. It created this kind of adversarial relationship between management and workers.
Right, because the workers felt like they were being treated like machines,
Right.
and management was frustrated that they weren't meeting their efficiency targets.
Exactly.
So it really highlights the human element that Taylor seemed to overlook because people aren't robots. They have needs, they have motivations, emotions, all these things that influence their behavior.
You're absolutely right. And this tension between efficiency and the human factor
Yeah.
is a recurring theme in the history of applied psychology.
Okay, so Taylorism, despite its flaws,
Right.
seems to have had this kind of lasting impact
Yes.
on how we think about work, but what came next?
Well, the next big development was the emergence of personnel selection.
Okay.
And this is all about using psychology to try and match people to the right jobs.
Okay.
And it was a major step towards the field of industrial organizational psychology, or IO psychology as we know it today.
So instead of just throwing people into any old job, you
Yeah.
started to think about, okay, well, how might someone's personality or their skills or their interests influence how they actually perform in that job?
Exactly. And this was a huge shift.
Yeah.
IO psychology is now a massive field, helps companies with everything from hiring and training
Wow.
to creating better work environments, promoting employee well-being.
It's fascinating to see how something that's so central to our work lives today
has its roots in these kind of early attempts to apply psychology to the workplace.
Exactly.
Speaking of applying psychology, I've always been curious about the psychology of advertising.
Right.
Like, why are ads so effective? Like, I'm guessing there's more to it than just presenting information about a product.
You're right on the money.
Okay, good.
To understand this, we need to talk about Walter Dill Scott,
Okay.
a psychologist who was fascinated by the power of suggestion. He literally wrote the book, or rather books, on the psychology of advertising.
Tell me more about this advertising guru.
Well, Scott believed that advertisers could tap into people's emotions and desires
Right.
to make their products more appealing.
Right.
He argued that consumers aren't always rational decision makers.
Okay.
They're influenced by subconscious factors, emotions, and even things like the way a product is presented.
So instead of just like listing features,
Right.
you start crafting narratives. You start appealing to our
Aspirations,
Yeah.
our fears, our desires,
Right.
creating like a sense of identity.
Yeah, okay. And this was a revolutionary idea at the time.
Yeah, it really was.
It challenged the prevailing view that consumers were simply rational actors,
Right.
making decisions based on logic and information.
Right. We're more complex than that.
Right.
Okay.
So Scott's work helped pave the way for modern advertising, which is all about creating emotional connections and telling stories that resonate with consumers.
Wow, that's fascinating. And
Yeah.
it makes you realize how much psychology goes into everything we see and hear.
Yes.
Even like just like a commercial.
Yeah, it really does.
Okay.
Now let's move on to a figure who bridges the worlds of psychology and pop culture.
Ooh,
Are you ready for this?
always.
All right. We're going to talk about William Moulton Marston,
Okay.
a psychologist who made some interesting contributions to the field.
Okay.
But he was also the creator of Wonder Woman.
Wait, Wonder Woman was created by a psychologist.
It is pretty amazing, right?
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What drew him to such diverse areas of study?
Well, he was interested in a variety of topics, but one area that particularly fascinated him was lie detection.
Okay.
He was a strong advocate for the polygraph.
So the creator of a superhero who stands for truth and justice
Right.
is also interested in lie detection.
It's a pretty compelling connection, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, and it speaks to the wide range of interests that these early psychologists had.
It does.
And it shows how they were applying their knowledge to all sorts of real-world issues and creative endeavors.
Okay, so we've talked about Taylor, we've talked about Scott, Marston, who's next on our list of psychology pioneers.
Next up, we have another power couple, Frank and Lillian Gilbreth.
Okay.
Frank was an engineer, Lillian was an industrial psychologist,
Okay.
and let me tell you, Lillian was a true pioneer.
Love to hear it.
Yeah, especially for a woman in a male-dominated field at that time.
Breaking those barriers.
Yes, absolutely.
What were their contributions?
Well, they were both influenced by Taylor's ideas about efficiency,
Okay.
but they took it a step further by focusing on what they call motion studies.
Okay.
And they used film to analyze the movements
Oh, wow.
involved in performing various tasks.
So they were like filming people doing their jobs
Precisely.
and being like, okay, how can we make those actions more efficient?
Exactly.
Okay.
Think of them as early workplace life hackers.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, they were all about optimizing workflow, finding the one best way to complete any given task.
Got it.
They even came up with this fun term for the 18 basic hand motions that they identified,
Okay.
called their bligs.
Birdbligs. It's adorable. It sounds like something out of like a Dr. Seuss book.
Uh-huh, it does.
But their work had a big impact, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Their principles influenced not just factories, but also things like kitchen design. The Gilbreths applied their ideas to make everyday life more efficient.
So the next time I'm like effortlessly prepping dinner
Yeah.
in my well-designed kitchen,
Right.
I can thank the Gilbreths
Yes.
for their motion studies and their Annerbligs.
Absolutely.
I love it. It's fantastic.
They brought a scientific approach to seemingly mundane tasks, but their work also highlighted the limitations
Okay.
of focusing solely on physical efficiency.
Ah, okay. I sense a but coming.
Well, around the same time the Gilbreths were doing their motion studies,
Yeah.
a series of groundbreaking experiments at the Western Electric factory led to this fascinating discovery. This became known as the Hawthorne studies.
Okay, I've heard of the Hawthorne studies, but I admit I'm a little fuzzy on the details. So refresh my memory. What was so groundbreaking about them?
So the Hawthorne studies set out to examine how factors like lighting and break times affected worker productivity. Seemed like a straightforward experiment. But the results were completely unexpected. It turned out that simply being observed changed worker behavior, regardless of the changes to their environment. So this phenomenon became known as the Hawthorne effect.
Wait, so just knowing they were being watched made people work harder? Why would that be?
It suggests that people are inherently social creatures. And their behavior is influenced by the attention they receive.
Even if it's just being, like, observed?
Even if it's just being observed by researchers.
Wow, okay. So it's not just about the physical conditions or financial incentives. It's also about feeling seen and valued. Feeling like what you do matters.
And this challenged the prevailing view of workers as, like, purely rational, self-interested beings. Motivated solely by money. So the Hawthorne studies led to what became known as the human relations movement in management.
So this was a pretty big shift in thinking, right? Instead of just focusing on efficiency and output, you have this new emphasis on the importance of social and psychological factors in the workplace.
And
I'm starting to see how all of these, like, seemingly disparate ideas, scientific management, motion studies, the Hawthorne effect, they're all connected in a way.
They are all connected.
Because they all reflect this growing understanding that human behavior is complex. And there's no one-size-fits-all approach to managing people.
You're exactly right.
And that brings us to another remarkable figure in the history of applied psychology, Letta Stetter Hollingworth. And she was a clinical psychologist who made groundbreaking contributions to the psychology of women and gifted children.
And she was...
I love that she's championing both women and giftedness.
She was a true trailblazer.
She sounds like she wasn't afraid to, like, tackle controversial topics.
Not at all, no. And
good for her.
She was especially passionate about debunking harmful stereotypes. And one of her major achievements was challenging the variation hypothesis. A popular belief at the time that men were inherently more variable than women.
So this hypothesis was basically saying that men had a wider range of abilities, both high and low, while women were kind of clustered more towards the average.
And some people use this to argue that, you know, men were therefore more likely to be geniuses, leaders, innovators, while women were, well, destined for mediocrity.
Wow.
Pretty insidious idea.
It is.
And Letta set out to prove them wrong.
Good for her.
She did.
So how does she go about doing that?
So she meticulously gathered data and showed that there was absolutely no scientific basis for the variation hypothesis.
Wow.
Her research demonstrated that the observed differences between men and women were due to social and cultural factors.
Not biological ones.
Exactly.
So she was essentially saying that if you give women the same opportunities and support as men, they'll achieve just as much, if not more.
Exactly.
Her work was absolutely crucial in challenging those gender biases that were so prevalent at the time. And it's amazing how much her research still resonates today.
It does.
We're still fighting against many of the same stereotypes that Letta was challenging a century ago. It's a powerful reminder that science can be a really powerful tool for social justice. And Letta didn't stop there.
She did.
She also took on another harmful myth that was popular at the time called functional periodicity. What is functional periodicity?
It was this widespread belief that women become physically and mentally impaired during menstruation.
Oh, wow.
And it was used to justify all sorts of discrimination against women.
So, like, women couldn't be trusted with important responsibilities or leadership roles because of their periods.
It was outrageous.
That's outrageous.
But Letta wasn't having any of it.
Good.
Through rigorous research, she completely debunked this myth.
Good for her.
Yeah.
How did she do that?
Well, she showed that there's no scientific evidence to support the idea that women's cognitive abilities are affected by their menstrual cycle.
You go, Letta. She was a true pioneer.
Yes, absolutely.
Her work was groundbreaking, not just in terms of its, like, scientific rigor, but also in its impact on society.
Absolutely. She was a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
And she paved the way for future generations of psychologists to continue challenging harmful stereotypes, advocating for social justice.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'd like to just briefly mention J.E. Wallin.
Okay.
He was a psychologist who raised concerns about the lack of professional standards in clinical psychology at the time.
I'm okay.
And, it's important to remember this is a relatively new field.
Right.
And there were a lot of questions about training, qualifications, ethical practices.
So he was kind of like a watchdog for the profession.
You could say that.
Making sure that clinical psychologists were held to high standards?
Yeah, he recognized that as the field grew, it was crucial to establish clear guidelines to ensure the quality and integrity of clinical practice.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
As with any profession that deals with people's well-being.
Right.
You need to have those ethical guidelines and standards in place.
Absolutely.
So it's a good reminder that even established fields are constantly evolving.
Absolutely.
And there's always room for critical reflection and growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our deep dives.
Wow. It's been quite a journey already.
It have.
We've gone from the factory floors of the early 20th century to the world of advertising and even the origins of Wonder Woman.
It's amazing.
So I can't wait to see what other insights await us in part 2.
I know, me too.
Buckle up, everybody. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. In part 1, we unearthed some fascinating stories about the early pioneers of applied psychology.
We did.
And I'm really curious to see how these ideas continued to shape our world.
Well, in this part, we're going to explore how applied psychology moved from being kind of a fringe idea to taking center stage in so many aspects of our lives.
So we're talking about a shift from the margins to the mainstream.
Exactly. And I think this shift really reflects a growing recognition of psychology's power to address real-world problems.
Okay.
It's no longer just confined to academic debates,
Yeah.
It's about using psychological insights to make a tangible difference in people's lives.
It's about bridging the gap between knowledge and action.
Absolutely.
Which I find really inspiring.
Yeah.
But I imagine this journey wasn't always easy.
Oh, absolutely not.
Like, I imagine these early pioneers must have faced some pushback.
They encountered skepticism, resistance, even outright hostility at times.
Okay.
Many people saw psychology as a soft science.
Right.
With little relevance to the practical world.
So they were kind of like rebels.
Right.
Challenging the status quo and pushing the boundaries of what was considered acceptable for psychologists to study.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, good.
They were pioneers.
Yeah.
In the truest sense of the word.
And their rebellious spirit paid off.
It did.
Because today, applied psychology is a thriving field.
Absolutely.
With so many different subdisciplines.
Yes.
Each focusing on these really specific areas of human behavior.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about all the ways that psychology is being applied today, from clinical practice to marketing, human resources, education, criminal justice, sports. The list goes on.
The list seems endless.
It does, and each of these areas has its own unique history.
Right.
And challenges.
Yeah.
But they all shared this common thread of using psychological principles to understand and improve the human experience.
Yeah.
It really speaks to the versatility and power of psychology as a tool.
And it also underscores this point that psychology is not this monolithic entity.
Right.
It's incredibly diverse.
Yes.
And constantly evolving with so many different perspectives and approaches.
Well said. And that's one of psychology's greatest strengths.
This diversity allows it to adapt to new challenges, embrace new discoveries, and constantly push the boundaries of knowledge.
It's like a constantly branching tree with each new branch representing another avenue for exploration.
I love that analogy.
You're discovering.
And as this tree of knowledge continues to grow, it's important to remember the roots.
Right.
Those pioneers that we talked about in part 1, they laid the groundwork for this amazing field. Their legacy continues to inspire us today.
Their stories remind us that progress often comes from individuals who are willing to challenge conventions, think differently, push the boundaries of what's possible.
Absolutely.
These early pioneers were visionaries who saw the potential of psychology to make a real difference in the world.
Indeed. They dared to imagine a world where psychology wasn't just confined to labs and textbooks, but was integrated into our everyday lives.
And their vision has become a reality.
It has.
It's an inspiring story. We've seen how what was once considered a fringe idea has become this central force in how we understand ourselves
and the
world around us.
And this story is still unfolding.
Yeah.
As we face increasingly complex challenges in the 21st century, applied psychology will undoubtedly play a vital role in finding solutions.
Whether it's addressing issues of social justice, promoting well-being, or creating more effective organizations.
Exactly.
Applied psychology offers valuable tools and insights.
It does, and I'm curious, what are some of the key developments that you think have contributed to this shift?
From margin to center stage for applied psychology?
Well, we've already touched on a few of them.
Okay.
The rise of industrial psychology, the Hawthorne studies, Lida Stetter-Hollingworth's groundbreaking work on debunking gender stereotypes.
Right.
These were all crucial moments that helped legitimize applied psychology and demonstrate its real-world value.
And it's important to remember that these weren't just like isolated incidents.
Right.
They were part of this larger movement, this growing awareness that psychology could be used to address practical problems and improve people's lives.
And as this movement gained momentum, it started to attract more researchers, practitioners, and funding.
Right.
And this led to a rapid expansion of the field.
Okay.
With new areas of specialization emerging.
They're like what?
Such as forensic psychology, health psychology, environmental psychology, to name just a few.
It's incredible to see how far the field has come.
It is.
What are some of the areas within applied psychology that you find particularly exciting or promising?
Well, one area that I'm particularly interested in is the application of psychology to technology design.
Okay.
As technology becomes increasingly integrated into our lives, it's essential that we consider the psychological impact of these tools and design them in a way that promotes well-being and human flourishing.
That's a really important point.
It is.
We can't just blindly adopt new technologies without thinking about how they might affect our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors.
Exactly. And this is where psychology can play a crucial role.
Okay.
For example, we can use psychological principles to design social media platforms that promote healthy interactions.
Okay.
And reduce cyberbullying.
Yeah.
We can create educational technologies that are engaging and effective for diverse learners.
Right.
We can even use technology to deliver mental health interventions.
Wow.
To people who might not otherwise have access to care.
Those are some really inspiring examples. It sounds like there's a lot of potential for applied psychology.
There is.
To help us navigate this rapidly changing technological landscape.
Absolutely. And this is just one example.
Right.
There are countless other areas where applied psychology is making a real difference, whether it's helping people cope with chronic illness, reducing prejudice and discrimination, promoting sustainable behavior.
The impact of this field is truly far-reaching.
It really is.
And what's interesting to me is that even though applied psychology has become so diverse and specialized, it still has this core focus on understanding and addressing human needs.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
At its heart, applied psychology is all about using psychological knowledge and methods to improve people's lives and create a more just and equitable world.
And that's a mission that I think we can all get behind.
I agree.
It's inspiring to see how psychology is being used to tackle some of the biggest challenges facing our world today.
And as we continue to grapple with these challenges, I believe that applied psychology will play an increasingly important role in finding solutions.
Okay.
The insights and tools that psychology offers are simply too valuable to ignore.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of what's possible.
I think so too.
With applied psychology.
Yeah.
So I'm eager to see what the future holds for this really dynamic and evolving field.
I think the best is yet to come.
Ooh, I like that.
As we continue to learn more about human behavior and how to apply that knowledge effectively, the potential for positive change is truly limitless.
Well, on that note of optimism and excitement, I think it's time to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive.
But don't go anywhere yet.
We still have much more to uncover in part 3. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've covered so much ground in this exploration of applied psychology, from its early pioneers to its wide-ranging impact on our world today.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And now in this final part, I think it's a good time to kind of step back and reflect on what we've learned.
I agree.
And what it all means.
Absolutely.
What are some of the key takeaways that stand out to you? What has surprised you the most?
You know, one thing that's really struck me is how psychology has gone from being primarily about theories and abstract ideas to being a force for practical change in the world.
Yeah.
We've seen how it's been used to improve workplace efficiency, create more persuasive advertising, debunk harmful stereotypes. The list goes on and on.
It's like psychology has broken free from the confines of the lab and is now out in the world tackling real-world problems and making a tangible difference in people's lives.
Exactly. And I think another key takeaway is that applied psychology is constantly evolving. What was considered cutting edge 100 years ago might seem outdated today.
Right.
But the fundamental principles of understanding human behavior and motivation remain incredibly relevant.
That makes sense. It's like fashion, you know? Trends come and go. But those basic principles of design and aesthetics endure.
Right.
So in psychology, maybe the specific tools and techniques might change.
Yeah.
But that core goal of understanding and improving the human experience, that remains constant.
Well said. And this highlights the importance of staying curious, staying informed, and staying open to new ideas and approaches.
Yeah.
The field of applied psychology is constantly growing, branching out in new directions. There's always something new to learn and explore.
Absolutely. It's a field that really rewards intellectual curiosity, a passion for making a difference, a willingness to challenge conventions and push boundaries.
Indeed, and I think that's what makes applied psychology so exciting and rewarding.
Yeah.
It's a field where you can truly make a positive impact on people's lives, whether it's helping individuals overcome challenges, improving the effectiveness of organizations, or even contributing to the creation of a more just and equitable society.
It's about using the power of psychology to make the world a better place, one person, one organization, one community at a time.
That's a great way to put it, and I think that's a perfect note on which to end this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've explored the history, the pioneers, the applications, and the implications of applied psychology.
We have.
But ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide how we want to use this knowledge.
Right.
And how we want to shape the future of this fascinating field.
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
We're not just passive observers of this field. We're active participants who have the power to influence its direction and impact.
Exactly. And I would encourage everyone listening to think about how they can use their understanding of psychology to make a positive difference in their own lives and in the world around them.
Okay.
You don't have to be a psychologist to apply these principles.
Right.
We all have a basic understanding of human behavior.
Yeah.
And we can all use that understanding to make a positive impact.
Absolutely. So to wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with the challenge.
Okay.
Think about your own workplace, your community, your own sphere of influence.
Yeah.
Where do you see opportunities to apply psychological principles to make things better? How can you use your knowledge to improve communication, foster collaboration, promote well-being, or create a more just and equitable environment?
That's a great challenge. And remember, even small changes can have a ripple effect. So don't underestimate the power of your actions and your insights.
This has been an incredible journey. We've seen how applied psychology has evolved from this fledgling field to a force for positive change. And it's clear that this journey is far from over.
Yeah.
There's still so much to discover, so much to learn, and so much to achieve.
Well said. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep applying your knowledge to make a difference.
This is The Deep Dive, signing off.